look at the beans first and grind their own beans and get those aromas. And we know that olfaction is partly a quantum activity. Biologists are studying this.
Greetings and welcome to the Alchemized podcast with me, your host, Dr. Neil Bulchandani. I'm so excited that I get to interview so many amazing people. I usually say thought leaders, artists, healers, philosophers, and how do I describe Ildi Revi? Let's do it, because I got the chance to sit down or stand, right? But I was pretty much sitting. Interview Ildi. That was just so cool. We've had some really amazing conversations, mostly via WhatsApp that led to this. But we've been in an email thread for 6 years since I started enjoying Purity Coffee. So I just want to point out Purity Coffee, that's not all of who Ildi is. And in fact, she is quite a synthesizer, a very deep pursuant of many different kinds of, I guess you could say, just life pursuits. So let me just read her bio. That's the best way to do this. And yes, she is Chief Learning Officer with Purity Company, the coffee company. My favorite coffee. I've enjoyed drinking it for years, 6 years, I think, to be exact. And yeah, other than having this mug for a long time, I've loved hearing the podcast, which will have links to the podcast that Jordan and Ildi host, representing Purity Company. But let's say that she is not just that, she's the author of The Coffee Guide to Better Health. It is a very amazing resource. I mean, I haven't read it yet, but I have read parts of it, and I just love how it's a hardcover. But what is circular coffee? I was going to read part of it because this is a good way to intro who she is. And boy, now if I could, get to this one place where she talks about what it is, it's grounding in 3 intersecting frameworks: circular economy, circular agriculture, and circular health. The circular economy and agriculture aim to reduce waste and improve resource efficiency through recycling and closed-loop systems. And let's just say there's a whole lot more. But in terms of like circular health coffee, in her book, she defines it as a holistic approach to coffee production from farm to roaster that integrates principles of circular agriculture, circular economy, and circular health to enhance the overall wellness of people, plants, and ecosystems. So yeah, it's pretty amazing. So she is, as I said, Chief Learning Officer with Purity Coffee. She lived and worked on a coffee farm in Zimbabwe's Vumba mountain range for 9 years. She's been a coffee roaster since 1999 and owned a retail roastery for 12 years. A master's degree in adult workplace learning. She designed and developed coffee education programs in roasting, tasting, preparation, and green coffee buying for the Specialty Coffee Association as their education manager from 2010 to 16. She was the main architect of the certificate programs of the Specialty Coffee Association of America before it merged with European Association to become the SCA. As a certified performance technologist, she was director of performance at Ally Coffee for 6 years. She developed Ally Coffee's employee learning programs, and as the staff PCQI, she designed the food safety system for FDA compliance and taught courses in coffee-specific FSMA, FSVP, and market dynamics for staff and clients. In addition, since 2008, she has been a Q Arabica instructor. Now she's evolved licensed Q grader, lecturer, and processing generalist at Purity Coffee. She's responsible for researching, gathering, and disseminating information about coffee's interaction with and impact on health and the environment. This includes lab testing and cupping coffees, writing literature reviews and blog posts, designing learning programs for staff and customers, and collaborating with farming, production, coffee industry, and scientific partners. Her departments at Purity are research and development and learning. She's traveled extensively to coffee farms in Colombia, Brazil, and Nicaragua, Honduras, and Zimbabwe, and has been leading the research projects in biochar for the Purity Cool Farm Initiative. Oh my gosh, that sounds amazing. I mean, I knew some of that, but boy, let me tell you. So I read from her bio on the Circular Health Organization. She's part of that. And yeah, I mean, we're going to have her on at least many more times. We'll get into a lot more. I mean, but you know, um, it's just really cool. She's got such a history in in adult education history. We even have a connection because she did some of her earlier education in Chicago, Cook County, and I am from an hour south of Chicago. And anyways, there's just so much we didn't get into on this, but what we did get into was just like her really keen understanding of coffee, but from the perspective that they have pioneered within Purity Coffee, which is looking at it as a food that can be amazing for us, depending on who you are and what you need and all of that. But we get way more into some of the philosophical topics. So, you know what? I just hope you enjoy this episode. You're listening to Smokeless Fire by Michael Gunger, and just check out the book. I encourage you to order it off of Amazon or wherever else you can get it. I encourage you to check out the podcast, and we'll have links to all of this. So enjoy, and I can't wait to hear what you think about this episode. All right, well, Ildi, I'm so excited for the chat because I just feel like there's too many good things that we get to talk about. So thanks for being with me. And I'm just excited that we get to have this conversation for my podcast.
I am so excited. When I saw when did you change the name of your podcast exactly? Because I love Compromise to Alchemized.
Yeah, I think it was probably like just over a year and a half ago, almost 2 years ago.
Mm.
So this is the third season, and I changed it like pretty much after season one.
It's just so perfect because, like, the plant I work with and have pretty much spent my whole adult life working with is coffee, and it's
Mm.
such an alchemical plant. I mean, when you think about what coffee goes through, so it starts out as a seed inside a fruit, so it's green and n- just full of all its chemicals and compounds as a
Mhm.
seed. Then it goes through one stage after another that's so related to alchemy. There's fermentation, so it's there, it dries, then it meets fire, and
Yeah.
the roasting completely changes it, creates flavors and compounds, lots of health compounds, and then we bring in water to drink it. So every
Hmm.
step transforms something raw into something that billions of people drink every morning, and you are drinking your cup of coffee. So, and I
Yes.
believe you're drinking a coffee that I had something to do with
Yeah.
creating. So my energy went into creating that, which now you're drinking,
Hmm.
and transferring that energy to you, and you're drinking it, right? And then you're creating this podcast because you have this, you know, you've been transformed a little bit by drinking that coffee. You've got your
Hmm.
caffeine and your chlorogenic acids and your anti-inflammatories, and all your neurons are, getting healthier from some of the compounds in the coffee, possibly. And then you're transferring it to all the thousands and thousands of people who are going to listen to this, who are going to go out and do something with their own lives. So you see, the transfer of energy is just such a beautiful thing with
Hmm.
coffee. And that's a long-winded way of saying I love Compromise to Alchemized. That's
Oh,
a great title.
well, thank you. No, I feel like that was what a journey. I feel like it was like a sensory, but more than that, cellular. And I'm like, okay. And then if we talk about what's going on in the metabolic process,
Mm,
or even like just the fact that, you know, my bronchioles could be dilating,
mhm,
and then but just I was I often think of where purity that will not where it's well, I think of all the things where it could be coming from the farms, these amazing places. And then I think
mm.
of, you know, the HQ in, I think, South Carolina, and then I think in glimpses of moments, from Madagascar to Morocco to all these other places that I've had coffee at and brewed it in different ways, I just think, oh, it's such a ritual in a beautiful way that transcends a liquid, that transcends even a custom, and it's like a communal. Even if I am like early morning drinking it on my own, like I was, and I'm listening to a podcast of you and Jordan on the Health First Coffee podcast, so I'm like hanging out with you all, drinking my coffee, feeling good, and then I'm like, wow, what a privilege it is to get to enjoy this beautiful beverage, beautiful drink. But then even more though, the like the interconnectedness with thinking about the conversation coming up with you. So it's a privilege for me. I told you I'm pinching myself with the chance to get to chat with you on long form about you. And yes, like why I even know you is because of following your
Mhm.
work. And then beyond that, I've been really fascinated just with how the trajectory of your career, people who call you mentor, people who have learned from you, and then also just what you pull from to look at concepts like in terms of historic, all the. I'm going to say too much now. People will be like, "What are you talking about, Neil?" I'm talking about like Ildi's, training, education, Chicago, and like history and diversity, and I'm just the things I
We
read
have so
about.
many connections. It's like we have so many
Yeah.
parallels.
Yes.
I that it's like a total vibe.
Yes,
It's like, why
definitely.
have we not done this before? Or
I
did we
don't
do this
know.
before? Maybe
No,
we have.
we've this has been in the works. It's been how many emails back and forth, have I mean, I think like since like 6 almost 6 years ago is when I first got an email contact with you, and you were gracious to respond to me, invite me into like the modules of the Neuroscience Council with Purity, and I just geeked out from the beginning, drinking it, and then so I've been an avid consumer, just like drinking it, enjoying Purity coffee since I knew about it, and then have gotten into those modules, and it's been an ongoing thread. So I don't know why it's taken so long, but I feel like well, this is a perfect time for the convo.
Yay.
So where do we start? Oh, I do you have a sense? I'd love to just kind of chat with you, and I have these questions to ask you in terms of like you and your trajectory, mm, but as well, I'm just excited to know more about like what is it. So I asked this question. We're going to come back to it at the time you
Okay.
want to, but I asked this question to everybody on my Compromise to Alchemize podcast, which is, what is your personal legend? And that is a theme that's borrowed from The Alchemist, written by Paulo Coelho,
Mhm.
which is the one of the most it's only the second, most all-time selling books. So it's to ask this question, and I can paint more of the picture when it's time. But it's what is your story? What is your calling, purpose? What do you put on this planet to do? And but then also the second question is your legend like a key on a map, which is what are the symbols, practices,
Mm.
signposts, clues that you use or have in your repertoire to kind of stay tuned into what this is? Because somebody like you've, I think, transformed so many times within your own life of what you did, yet I'm sure keeping some of the constants there. So yeah, I mean, we can go there first if you like, and that could be good, or
Yeah,
we can come back
let's
to it.
do it.
Yeah,
Yeah. So I love this concept also because, the concept of your life being a tapestry, a person's life being
yeah,
a tapestry. And when and pulling on different threads and, what you decide to create on it. But so I'm in sort of the later years of my life. I'm over 60 now. And so one of my backgrounds is I have a master's in adult education. And when we do it, we become adult learning practitioner, we want to study the stages of development of adults. So just like kids have their development stages, the kid has to be able to lift their head before they can push their body up, before they can
Mhm.
roll over, and then they crawl and then they walk or they ambulate somehow. Some kids don't crawl, they like shuffle.
Yeah.
Um, and then so on. And the same thing with learning. There are different stages of learning anything. For math, you need to be able to add before you can multiply and subtract and all of those things. So there's development stages we're well aware of with kids, but adults also go through those. And but the way they conceptualize it in adult development are sort of life uh challenges that how you resolve them pushes you to the next development stage, or
Mhm.
how you don't resolve them. But one of the stages in the sort of over 60s is that time, especially, like, our minutes are far more valuable than dollars, and how
Mhm.
we spend our time, what we spend our time on, who we spend our time with. So for me, I'm in the final years of now I look back, and this was really cool that you asked me to do this, because I do look back on my life sometimes, but I don't like doing the past looking stuff, because it's just, for me, it's a lot of time spent
Mhm.
on stuff that, like, I don't know, am I rewriting history? Anyway, so so I don't like to spend time in the past, but I did for this
Mm.
exercise. And what I've realized is that sort of everything I've learned has led me to this point in my life, which, if I can encapsulate what I want to do with these remaining years, is to build the scientific case for why food grown in living systems, organic, getting the earth back to, like, its vibrancy,
Mhm.
and do it through coffee, because coffee is what I know.
Mhm.
So, going from my earliest days when I was studying history and had went to local cafes in the 80s in Austin, Texas, to living in Zimbabwe, meeting people, coming back, doing my master's in adult learning, and then going back to Africa, to Mozambique, and I did go to Madagascar.
Okay.
Madagascar is insane,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
We'll
Yeah.
talk about that.
Yeah.
Going back, which is where I met my future husband, a coffee farmer, not in Mozambique. His farm is on the border of Mozambique. Had my kids, so on. Moved back to the States to set up a coffee company that was vertically integrated from farm to cup. And I needed to learn more about coffee. So I turned to the coffee trade association called the Specialty Coffee Association of America at the time. It has since merged with Europe, and it now is just the Specialty Coffee Association. But
Mhm.
I worked with a woman named Ellie Hudson, and together we visualized an adult learning program that was based on my two favorite adult educators. One is Miles Horton, who, who built the Appalachian folk schools, right? And they trained back in the 30s, union organizers, and then the civil rights movement filtered through there. So a lot of, like, Pete Seeger's songs were written
Yeah.
at 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 the Highlander folk schools, which was what Miles Horton and his team built. And Paulo Freire in Brazil, who did these literacy campaigns that brought Brazil Brazil's literacy just light years forward. Millions of people learned through this process. So we designed our education program to do something similar, where we used coffee professionals who have deep understanding of coffee to work with them how to teach coffee and how to design adult learning programs. And then we created the certificate programs for the Specialty Coffee Association of America. We went over to Europe and then we worked with the Europeans, um, and like basically shared everything we were doing, all of the courses we developed, our photos. We just shared our Dropbox with them. And then the Europeans developed a program. So when they came together to form the Specialty Coffee Association, it was sort of their education program. They had taken a different structure than ours. So at that point, um, they married the two programs. And it was at that point that I moved to a new job, which was at Ally Coffee, doing
Mhm.
their being their director of performance. And at Ally is when I met Andrew Salisbury of Purity Coffee, and I began to work with Purity. At the same time, I was working for Ally and eventually just work with Purity now. So it's interesting. I say this arc because the adult learning has been a major part of my story and how I approach coffee. It's through learning. I'm not a scientist, although I studied science and I actually taught science in Zimbabwe for 2 years. But I'm not a scientist. I haven't been in a lab. I don't have a PhD in science, but I'm able through my history degree to read and analyze, literature and follow things through. And so I really want to devote my life to building a case for healthy foods through, bringing the earth back into balance. So,
Mm. Yeah.
roundabout way of answering your question. So, what's my personal legend and how did I get there? Yeah.
Yeah. There's questions within that I'd love to ask. And maybe, part of it is thinking through like because it's like you have some multiple layers of like the education part of like making a case for, and development and education. So that's a lot in terms of what that does on its own. But within that, you have like all of the work that you've done to create, to help bring and distribute, in this case, like such a wonderfully robust and healthy coffee. And in that particular way, it's like you're both looking at a way to bring education. Maybe this is better for me to phrase it as a question. So it feels to me like you're part of creating something that is such a benefit. Then you have the, identifying the case, which is like the science of it. But then you have the
Mm.
education of that. So it's like at least three arms, or three layers of like where you would say your role is in this kind of desire you have, conviction you have. Does that kind of at least
Yeah.
somewhat
y-
identify?
Yeah. So I think each sort of leg helps the other leg to
Mhm.
look at problems because Paulo Freire did problem posing. Look at problems within the industry. Like the coffee industry has a lot of work to do.
Yeah.
Every food industry does. It's almost like being in a family. Like you can criticize your own family, but don't let other people criticize you. So I get kind of defensive about the coffee
Mhm.
industry, but at the same
Yeah.
time, I'm very critical of where we're at, particularly in the awareness of food safety issues,
Mhm.
basic food safety.
Mhm.
And the entire world has some cleanup to do. And there are organizations and governmental things that for years have been working on this, but hopefully people will realize how important that is for human health.
Yeah.
So that's one leg of it, but I can look at it through a narrative and through a human side of things
Mhm.
as, adult development, health development, all of these things. Yeah.
I'm excited I loved how you started out our conversation, like, painting a picture of the alchemical nature of, like, the consumption, drinking this coffee. So similarly, in The Alchemist, there's that moment. I always say, like, "Oh, I don't wanna ruin it for anybody," but you've had a chance to read, and it's like, for me, I revisit this book, The Alchemist,
Mm.
so many times just in my mind, but, I carry it with me whenever I travel, and even if on the plane, my fingers open and I only go to one page, whatever that is, I immediately go through a portal and just experience the goodness of my history with it, but more than my history, it's Paulo as a writer, but it's I love that part, how Santiago the shepherd, you know, makes it through because he ends up being mentored by this alchemist. He didn't want to be.
Mm.
There was an intellectual, there was an academic on the caravan who's like earnestly, fervently trying to get his way to the alchemist so that he could be discipled by and learn this very, very specific subject, the alchemy. And Santiago, on the other hand, he was in search of his treasure. Like, that's what he was going for. But
Mm.
as a byproduct of that, this alchemist figure, which is a very mysterious figure in the book, but he sees Santiago and he ends up choosing him to mentor him. I don't know. Yeah, I get lost in that beautiful story. So I think I want to start there with you on, and you may have already named them, but are there any, like, if you're Santiago in this picture that I carried, although you could be the alchemist too, um, who are the alchemists that taught you the alchemy of what you are and who you know and what you do? Who can you look to as, like, perhaps somebody who, in search of what your desire is, um, gave you such a? There was a moment in the story where, kind of the alchemist calls out Santiago and puts him in pressure, and against opposition says that Santiago will, uh, basically create an alchemical process and speak to the hand that wrote it all, and handle the elements and prove his mastery of alchemy. When Santiago was like, "Why did you say that I would do that?" Is there anybody that's challenged you such, or you recognize has done something way more than just teach you things that you can, reflect on?
There have been a few people. One is my husband slash ex-husband, Rob, who is the coffee farmer, and his neighbor, a coffee farmer named John Wisdom. I learned so much about farming and nature and growing and agriculture and work on the farm and employees on the farm and just what it takes to produce crops is incredible amount of energy farmers and their families and their because it's very often a family business. I mean, leave out the corporate farms, but still so much food is produced within family and community systems and how everything interacts there. Put that together, there she doesn't even know. I don't know her personally, but Ilaria Capua is the one who coined the phrase circular health. And
Okay.
she based it on she's a doctor. I believe she's in the United States now. She's Italian. Johns Hopkins, I think. And the idea is that the health of the person is only healthy within the entire environment that they're in and the entire environment of what they put into their bodies, the water and the food and so on. And they related the One Health movement was very related to disease, but you can, of course, put this together with nutrition. Very, uh, it's a direct line there. But she also then talked about circular health to incorporate sustainability and the whole concept of circular economies and circular agriculture and so that really and it was my colleague, Ricardo Pereira, who also I worked with at Ally. He's another one of these great people who influenced me and continues to do so. Is he brought me the idea of circular health, and he said, "Why don't we call it circular health coffee?" So he's actually, give him credit where it's due,
Mhm.
coined the phrase circular health coffee, and we together went into this whole world of circular health and circular economy. So I have the growing piece from Rob and all the other farmers I've learned from. That piece from Ricardo. I worked with a lot of legends in the coffee industry too, and
Mhm.
there are a lot of legends. I worked with Trish Rothgeb is one of my besties. She coined the phrase third wave coffee. So that was her. But she's just the way she approaches producing coffee and specialty coffee and cupping and tasting. And she was my mentor in coffee tasting and got me involved in the entire Cube program, which was a coffee grading program that has since been absorbed by the Specialty Coffee Association. And through that, I learned quality and cupping and green coffee grading and all the technical skills. And Trish was major in that, as well as people like Todd Mackey, um, also one of the greats. And oh my goodness, I could just go on and on naming them: Jim Brady and Spencer Tour and Jose Rene. And I mean, I could go on and on.
You could, but
Great
some of
people.
us, we I feel like I'm, like, you know, getting to visit some of those, like, legends through you, and I think I've heard, I told you I was like, "Phew," couldn't wait to listen to more podcast episodes where you were on just to, like, learn more about, I know these conversations are one moment in time, so I wanted to learn more, and I mean, it was great hearing Andy, um, of Phil's Coffee.
Tringle.
Yeah,
Yeah.
refer to you as
She's
a
she's
branded
a
mentor.
legend.
Mm,
She's incredible. She also taught me a lot about
mm.
the, market. She worked for Green Coffee Importers for a number of years, and she really explained to me how the market system worked, and she's a great teacher.
Oh,
Yeah,
well, I love
one of
that because she's called you a mentor and
oh,
a good friend, so I love that. You're so the humility within coffee, I feel like you're all so great that you're, like, willing to share and learn. I mean, I can only imagine, not being within that field and industry, but having a huge appreciation for it and thinking of the analogs within my own life of who influenced me. But yeah, as you said, you've built quite a history and you've been in this. I've been in chiropractic, but then it branched into more airway, feeding health, and of course we can add my specialties in longevity and quantum biology and biofield, embryology. But it's 18 years, and so I feel like, wow, if I look ahead, I know that life gains you experience, and also it's not just about the years, but it is around the people you surround yourselves with, and how do you find those people? So I think that's where I was thinking. I'm going to go back to there's two moments I just feel like stand out to me sometimes when I'm talking to somebody about this rubric of the alchemist, and you can tell me if you remember this part, but it's when Santiago sells his sheep and he ends up in Tangier, right in northern Morocco, and he ends up in a glass shop because he sees the glasses in this, a glass sales shop of this wares, and the owner is somebody. He talks to him, and he proposes to the owner that he could polish the glasses, and perhaps that would lead to more people wanting to come up the hill to drink the tea. And well, he ends up, being able to furnish this shop owner's dream. This shop owner had this dream of what he wanted to do in his life because he helped increase sales to the point to where it was, providing the financial gateway for this owner to do that. So I can't help but think, like, in your life of this learning, but there's also been the entrepreneurial journey of learning about, how do you navigate being in one way, I think an innovator, entrepreneur, somebody who has worked with companies, created your own. Are there glasses you can remember polishing? Now, this is an open-ended question. Like, what does that scene in the book bring to you? And like thinking about your journey.
Well, I'll tell you, for all the years I was in coffee, learning about the farming, the da 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 da, up to starting my own roastery and cafe and running that for 12 years. And I never thought about coffee and health until I met Andrew Salisbury and through Ricardo. And he put on these glasses of coffee as a health product. And in all those years, I had never thought of it that way. So I'm like, what is this guy talking about? And I started looking and then realized how there were like tens of thousands of studies, and it's not just on caffeine.
Right.
One of the greats is Adriana Farah, who spent her life really a lot of it studying chlorogenic acids and demonstrating the health effects of those. And Andrew introduced me to her, and so I've worked with her. She's a professor in Brazil at uh, the Federal University of Brazil in Rio. And she runs an entire department that studies in nutrition. A lot of the studies have to do with coffee or matcha. Um, but boy, she's put on some glasses for me too. So
Mhm.
between Andrew, who introduced it to me, and just it opened an entirely new world, to the people I've met through working with him. I mean, Adriana, she's a hardcore scientist, and she has no no filter for correcting me when I get things wrong or when I ask questions, and she'll just like launch into these like lectures. So I have learned, and I've now known her for 10 years and have been corrected by her for 10 years, that I've learned just so much about science, what you can say, what you can't say, and honestly, some of the limitations of science. And this is a great bridge to our quantum
Mhm.
biology and quantum agriculture discussion. Now, I do want to say here, when I'm doing this discussion with you, I'm talking just as myself as an
Mhm.
individual. So, y'all have heard what company I work for, but my opinions are my own, my thoughts, my hypotheses about where agriculture is going in the future. These are just my own, and they don't reflect on my company necessarily. They're not part of our branding. It's me as an individual.
Mhm. This is Ildi's thoughts from Ildi.
Well, so one of the things, and I haven't yet talked about this with Adriana, but I have talked about it with other people. And as we're looking at the health of circular health, like Ilaria Capua, when we look back at the way the world was created, nature, the universe created our world as it evolved over time, and humans came along and we've impacted the planet, but so have other animals,
Mhm.
and plants and processes. Anyway, we've impacted the planet a lot. There have been a few times that archaeologists and anthropologists have shown where groups of people have impacted the environment negatively before all of our chemical, agriculture started. Like in West Africa, there was a lot of deforestation there, and that led to the desertification of much of West Africa. West Africa used to have a lot of forests and water and things, but so that happened, I think, tens of thousands of years ago. And there are other places where we know that the hypothesis, where did these people go, is they just outlived their resources. They outfarmed themselves or whatever. So this isn't new, but what is new is this. The chemicals that were created for the agricultural revolution of the 1930s, 40s, and so on. And we had our dust bowls, right, in Western United States, Central United States. But these chemicals do something completely different. These chemicals, we put them onto the land, and I'm talking uh, nitrogen, NPK, nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium is NPK is a very common fertilizer, just even nitrogen, ammonium
Mhm.
nitrate, and then all of the things that are meant to kill weeds or insects. The plants come up looking healthy, and now the farmer can go, "Wow, look how healthy these are. Look how big and strong and tall these stalks of maize are," whatever is the crop that's being grown. But it got there, I feel like, in a way that's almost cheating because they got certain chemical molecules. So we're looking at it very Newtonian.
Mhm.
These are machines, little plant machines. Like you give it this NPK and all these other things, and it produces now, the plants used to be living without all these things before, right? But in an organic way. So these chemicals now are killing the microorganisms in the soil
Mhm.
that are similar to the microorganisms in our bodies, which we know the microorganisms in our bodies help to break down our food into its own molecules that we're able to use for our living processes. So the same with the plants, but if we've killed the microorganisms in the soil, it's kinda I mean, I wonder if it's like the way we're taking supplements to
Mhm.
supplement the fact that we don't have some of the compounds. Well, so now there are a number of studies being done on organic farming and organic regenerative, and I'm not gonna have the debate about the certification stuff, but we're talking about just really going back to the way we honor the earth and farming with lots of compost and, you know, and targeted use of natural things to deter pests and diseases and all these things. Now the soils can produce all those microorganisms that are doing all sorts of things. We just have no idea. Science, this is where I said science is just not where it needs to be yet.
Mhm.
But surely we know that just polyphenols, and phenolic compounds, flavonoids, all these things in organic foods are higher than in not organic foods. There was a scientist named Baranski, in 2014 who studied it did a meta-analysis of 343 studies that found that organic crops had meaningfully higher polyphenols, phenolic acids, which are antioxidant compounds, were about 19% higher, flavonols about 50% higher, and flavonones about 69% higher in organically produced foods. So these are compounds now in organic you get, but if you're having the conventional food, you don't have access to that. So my question then is, what does that do in our bodies?
Mhm. Yeah. Well, that phrase of how can we go from compromise to alchemize? You're answering it like in your
Mm,
place in the world. It started when I was pacing around and I was like, "Oh, how can we go from compromise to alchemize? How can we go from a compromised airway to an alchemized airway?" And my wife was
mm,
very wise. She's like, "Yes, but Neil, why don't you?" She was thinking about life import and significance and also inclusion, but she was also thinking of like branding. But more important than that, when she said, "Why don't you take out the airway?" Which is like, of course, I'm like, "Oh yeah, how can we go from compromised to alchemized? How can we go from a suffering, struggling existence or compromise in all the ways that we can think about it to an alchemized way of to healed, integrated, whole, that, chrysalis like in between, that phase, that gauntlet, that, transformation process, that tunnel or that pathway between can be looked at as like an impossible pathway or pretty complicated, and it is. And so that's why I say, well, yeah, it takes a village, but it also takes systems thinking. It takes people in their own fields tackling it. So you go ahead. I want you to jump in and
Well,
see.
the alchemists laid out the system for us. They have all their different stages that, and I'm not an alchemist, but I do know there are different stages. They
Yeah.
go from, you know, and it's that whole lead into gold thing, which is just a metaphor. But
Yes.
but but
Yeah.
we do go through the processes of drying and extraction and fermentation and then transformation and all of these things. So it is a system, and we can follow that same system in our lives.
Hmm.
Focusing on our health,
Hmm.
and that's
Yeah.
where the compromise to alchemize goes through. Is first, we have to really acknowledge what it is. What is causing these health concerns, health issues? Analyze them, break them apart, and then fermentate, like letting them sit there, fomenting, really studying, trying things out, different things. And then, you know, we come out the other end and hopefully have found a way to be healthier.
Yeah. So that's like, this almost like a funnel of, well, in my way, I was looking at this as a side, linear funnel, the equation of life and the, compromise to alchemize is like you're speaking very much of this, even with talking about quantum agriculture, talking about systemic, you know, macro, but it comes down to like, yeah, you yourself have um, journeyed through so many different you furthering and furthering and furthering your own awareness because we're coming back to it because through food and then back even further more specific through coffee like that is your the very specific I don't want to say lens but
Mm.
you've chosen you've become such a craft person of exploring coffee because it's a food and it's part of the agricultural, part of the production, part of human existence, and of course I am it's not, it's not beside me or not above me or not, whatever the right adverb I think is what I'm looking for is it's not beyond me. There we go. To say that coffee is such a ubiquitous and also it's such an important topic and so I do want to dive in for those people who are like, Neil, when are you going to ask Ildi about all
About
she knows about
coffee.
coffee? But I feel like I love this conversation because it's more than that. It's more than coffee. It means more than that. Yet in and of itself, there's a lot to explore there. So yeah, what
Well,
would you like
let's
to
just look at this. I love how you set that up, because coffee, of all products, food products we eat, is one that we as people have to transform ourselves in the morning. We have to add water to it.
say?
I mean,
Mhm.
I suppose with ready to drink things, people are open them up and drink. But still, I would say probably most people in the world go through the process of brewing. Some people buy ground coffee already, but those people who look at the beans first and grind their own beans and get those aromas, and we know that olfaction is
Mhm.
partly a quantum activity. Biologists are studying this, and we do this creation of this food product. But that cup that you drink in the morning is unique. And Tomorrow, it'll taste a little bit different, even if you do everything the same way, grinding and brewing, because you're not the same person drinking it every day.
Mhm.
So, how that food, and I suppose, we can say that about any food product, but particularly with coffee, is the compounds change. If the temperature of the water is just 1 degree Celsius higher or lower, you're going to be extracting different compounds because coffee is such a complex drink. This is also where, talking about these lenses, where science and human beings will never have enough science, because that scientist, unless you become part of a in vivo trial, is never going to tell you exactly what that cup of coffee did for you unless you're in tune with yourself. I know listening to your body is an overused phrase, but really
Yeah.
that's the data that you have. So what it does from you, for one, like, for example, let me ask you, you've been drinking a certain coffee for a number of months over and over again, and then one day you drink it and it's just that doesn't work for you. It just tastes different, or you don't feel good after drinking it. Has that ever happened to you?
Not with purity, first of all. So I've been an avid drinker of purity for like I said, almost 6 years. And but that being said, I love purity. But then if I'm in a new city, new country, or wherever, I'm gonna like stroll about and buy coffee from a shop just because I like it. So I'm usually choosing like craft coffee, organic. Um, but yeah, sometimes I'll drink a cup and it's like, okay, but if I drink a second one of that kind, then I can feel it ping on my adrenals, or I can taste the metals, or whatever it is. I can taste,
Right?
I don't feel as optimized. I don't feel as clear, cogent, clarified, which it doesn't happen with purity. When I drink that, and I've loved, my favorite is the medium, but I do love the light and the dark, and of course all the sacred. I got to try out a lot of the sacred coffees, and even, oh my gosh, I would say, okay, I was going to mention this at some point, but I the dark coffee. Oh my gosh, I geeked out on your episode with Jordan where you were talking about like, oh, the amazing things uh with dark coffee and NMP and NRF2 pathways, and that speaks my language as a health practitioner, but how much good comes from the dark. And yet I have touted the benefits of coffee, especially with all of your intel on like when light and or medium, but light, that's amazing for bringing out, chlorogenic acid. So for the liver and liver detoxifying.
Right.
So dark, but dark, I don't like dark from most companies out there. Yet purity tastes really good in the dark. So
Well,
I feel
we
like
don't
I like it.
roast it too dark.
Yeah,
We
that's
try and avoid, like, with the dark roast, some of those
mhm.
compounds can get really bitter and
Yeah. But you were asking me, and I know you were saying, has that ever happened where, I've had coffee and it's like, oh yeah. I mean, okay, now I think back to how much coffee I was drinking before that. That just wasn't good. But even, yeah, like I said, when I'm traveling, now I'm just like, I have certain things I'm not gonna drink it. So if I go to a place and they're like, yeah, yeah, I'm like, I always
yeah.
bring my AeroPress and I bring coffee. I even like when I'm traveling and I'm gonna drive somewhere for a few days, I bring my coffee grinder because I love to grind that coffee, get the fresh
Mm, get the whole
experience cold.
experience.
Yeah, so I'm a big fan of that. But there are those times when I am and I'm like, oh yeah, I notice and it's not as good. Um and yeah, it leaves me like thinking like, oh, it brought me down in energy, and it took away from, which purity doesn't happen to me, but there are those other coffees, yeah.
Well, so this is what I really wanna study. Why is that? And it can happen even with the most well-crafted specialty coffees.
Mhm,
Might have something in it. And, of course, we can lab test for the sort of known offenders, mycotoxins, which in coffee generally, even if there are mycotoxins in specialty coffee, they're gonna be at very, very low levels. The heavy metals,
mhm.
and it's not just the lead, cadmium, arsenic, and mercury. And by the way, I've never once found mercury in coffee
Mm,
ever.
mhm. Okay.
So that's a good thing.
Yeah.
But these other metals and anything in the soil, there can be things in the soil that the plant takes up that may be a problem. And so here's an example. And I won't say the country, and this is completely a hypothesis of mine. There's no science to back this up. But there was a country we were considering buying coffee from for a number of years. We never got around to it just because we couldn't find one. And it always tested pretty standard in the metal tests. Then a volcano erupted and just covered a lot of the coffee growing area. And after that, the coffee for a few years had more lead in it than I've ever
Mm,
seen. And I don't know if that's come from the volcanic ash or something else. Who knows? But it tested in some specialty coffees and you couldn't taste it. I mean, because we always start by cupping the coffee first. If it tastes where we need it to be, then we start studying the science of it, the compounds, the mycotoxins, the mold, all the things. But this particular, there were some coffees that cupped beautifully, but they would have levels of lead that certain people really should not be drinking. It was really a concern. These have gone down over the years, so I do think it might have been related to the, volcano, but then I don't know, I won't say it as a scientific certainty for sure.
well, I would love to, if I could take this opportunity to ask you some questions. I'm like, oh, now I'm thinking about all the things I want to know from you, Ildi. Um, and so they might fit in. I'm not one to do a rapid fire. I don't. I've never done a rapid fire, so I'm not gonna do. It's not rapid, and this isn't. Well, it's the alchemy of fire. But I'm gonna ask you questions, and then maybe you could say as little or as much as you'd like about it. But just know that there's like those questions that I was like, I'm gonna ask you these questions, Ildi, and now I rewrote almost all of them. I'm like, no, I'm not gonna ask you most of these because we've talked about some of them, but I do want to touch on a couple things that I feel like, mm, both like me, Neil, I've been purveying like what you know about and what you share about. Because I know education is like one of the arms of your personal legend. I feel like this would be a good time to share on that. But I think, mm, instead of talking too because I'm gonna have links to, like, this episode on the Health First Coffee, there's gonna be links to these episodes that talk about topics that you've talked about. So, but, kind of for you, what would you say of all the benefits of coffee that you've talked about, and the what's made the most impact on you? Like, what has benefited your life the most as somebody who enjoys it, drinks it, um, on that part?
Well, I can say it's interesting because you've already brought up 2 of them. One thing is the impact on the liver. I had and this is just me, and I will claim it as my own, and again, I wanna be very clear that I don't wanna push coffee on anyone.
Mhm.
I'm not here to sell coffee, but it is a remarkable plant product that has been shown to have so many outstanding benefits to human health. But that's just as we know with anything complex, and then you add that into a human being that is infinitely complex.
Mhm.
It's different for everyone. So right there, we have got to like I say this because of something I'm frustrated in the world right now is how people are simplifying things to the
Mhm.
point of inaccuracy on
Yeah,
an ongoing basis, but then now it's being repeated.
right.
So this concept that there is the healthiest coffee. So our coffee works for you. I just met somebody who has become a friend. She doesn't drink the coffee from my company. She drinks it from a competitor. And I said to her, "You know what? If you love that, it's working for you, do
Yeah.
it." Like, I don't care where you get your healthy coffee from,
Mhm.
but if you are concerned about health, if you need data and you need numbers, this is when bringing in certificates of analysis and so on can give you a little glimpse into that product you're drinking, the coffee you're drinking. But it's just a snapshot in time, and it just says what's in it. We don't know how it's going to impact anybody at any point. Let me go back to the frustrations. The first frustration is competitors, which just makes me so sad because if we're all doing the work, we should be supporting each other
Mhm.
in this movement to move our industry forward. And I'm talking about the mold and mycotoxin thing. Like, how much is it to ask that your coffee or your food product has no mold, like it's not going rotten,
Mhm.
and has no mycotoxins, which are the poisons, the toxins produced by certain mold species. The selling point of our products, it's not rotting and it's not going to
Right.
produce toxins. So this is the new category, is not rotting, not toxic. I mean, like, seriously?
Yeah.
So that frustrates me because we should be coming together and telling the industry, sort that out. Like, that's the basic. But
That's
now
basic.
let's look at this food product that we
Mhm.
have that it has is so complex, this coffee, in terms of its just number of compounds in the green coffee, and then you when you roast it and how you roast it produces different compounds, and of course how it was grown. We love our regenerative coffee, or organic regenerative is even better, and all those microorganisms, all those flavonoids and polyphenols that these things are producing for us. So let's be working on that. Let's be studying that together instead of trying to bash each other. And also the reliance on, sorry, I'm expounding on a bunch of stuff here.
Go for it. It's good.
The reliance on certificates of analysis, those are great. They're good because we can test and we can see what's in them and we can verify and we can move on. They're just one tool in the toolbox. Um, but when people then start picking apart, and first of all, a lot of people, when they look at a certificate, they'll see something on there and there'll be like a level that is detectable of something. Let's say cadmium, because cadmium is in soil everywhere, most places, and it gets into most food products. So they'll see a small amount of it and freak out and think it's top. Well, let's do the calculation here. And one side issue is, yes, we drink multiple cups of coffee a day. So we have to take that into effect. And then whatever is that compound, what is it actually doing in your body? How does your body normally get rid of that compound? Is anything going on with you? Are you taking a new medication or something that may inhibit the processing of this compound, whatever it is, or element? So we look at the cadmium. We have to look at 1 cup is plus or minus, depending on how you grind and brew it, and 15 grams. So the first thing you have to look at on the COA is, how is it given to you in terms of, is it parts per kilogram or parts per 100 gram or whatever. So now you've got to change your calculation for a 15-gram cup of coffee. You grind it. How thick did you grind it? Is it an espresso grind, or is it, a French press grind? That's going to extract things differently. How hot is the water you use? What is the water contact time? You know, and so on. And so what ends up in your cup of coffee that you're drinking is something gonna be completely different that I will never be able to tell you from this certificate of analysis. So when people and the punchline here for me is when people point to these things or attack people on other things is they're just one indicator of what is in your coffee, and it shows that we're doing the work and we're giving whatever we can to, help you make a decision for your personal health.
Mhm.
But to attack other people about this when we're doing the work, we should like that just frustrates me so much in our industry and online. Um, yeah,
Mhm.
I lost the thread of what we were talking
No,
about
that's good
here.
because I think we're talking about, humanity and how do you regard one another and how do you when you're set out there with the company or whatever their goals are, is like wait, at the end of it all, aren't we really coexisting on this planet to live, to excel, to be healthy, to build relationship, to but I think sometimes there's either cognitive dissonance or rather there's an inability to pan out and look at the whole context of our existence, and then we can get into this conversation metaphysically. I think a lot of us are, I think for me, from an early age, I became aware of the need to look beyond myself. And perhaps there were negative things that led me there. But in the end, I try to like really look and empathize and of course surround myself with people where we're thinking towards not only independent thinking because unfortunately in institutional thinking and more of the mainstream and the educational system, all these things like how much of that is just not good and ideal. And as an example of you've had to go and look and search, and for me within my own career I've had to look at the patients that I saw, and I've had to
Mhm.
learn more, and I have had to really branch out and learn beyond any training institute or
Right,
research that I've known I mean, for me as an innovator and creating a system of healing and creating even applications of photobiomodulation that didn't exist yet, and one of the examples here, I'm just going to say it so people don't think I'm saying words that if you've not heard me talk and you're hearing Ildi and or like, what is Neil talking about? Which is violet light, and 405 nanometers on the maxilla for 30 seconds can integrate your abs if you've got diastasis, ab separation. Like, let's say you've had a baby and you're in postpartum and the abs are not coming together. Well, of course, Lindsay from BirthFit and Nico Kennedy who's a assistant, director. She's director of research for the Institute of Applied Quantum Biology. They both will say like red light on the abdomen helps bring the apps together and heal that, which is so good for the gut and for posture and breath. And then I said, that's amazing. But I experimented and saw violet light on the maxilla. What it does is it creates this neural interface where it does these things. Well, I didn't know that. There was no research out there to show
right.
that until now, countless cases and years, and then teaching other practitioners this. Violet light on the maxilla does accomplish this effect. And okay, we could theorize that because it shines on the maxillary artery, and that has its origin embryologically in pharyngeal arch formation, where it's fourth, fifth week gestation. So if we go 40 weeks in utero and we are born, 4 or 5 weeks is at the beginning. So that's when the mouth forms and the maxillary artery forms. And so let's say you have that happen. Well, these are the theories as to why, and the codifying I'm putting out there, and the people that I've trained
Right.
are helping me with this. But, anyways, that was a rabbit hole. What I mean to say is that we necessarily need to invent new ways of not only doing things, but also help bring one another along on a journey of how to talk about things. So, how many times do we need
Absolutely.
to get frustrated? Because if we can't be okay with the way things are, because enough of us have to wake up and be the smelling salts to those around us, so we can jostle ourselves to think a different way. Because otherwise, we're going to fall into the same lethargy and the same So
or be tempted by the same, b techniques or methods, that are not helpful.
mhm,
So, like, I mean, just going back to my example,
mhm,
people, the fear mongering. I just any kind of fear mongering when it comes to a health product or a health situation, you're starting to cause anxiety in other people because what? I'm gonna die. My dog, for me, I'm on some algorithm for dog food, and I'm just like, oh my God, I've been killing my dog by feeding it. Like you, and it's just sort of like, wait a second, calm down. But now I have anxiety.
mhm,
And
mhm,
people do that with, I'll talk about my experience, coffee on these marketing things. It m- it doesn't even make me angry. Going back to something you just said earlier, what it does is it makes me sad because we are missing an opportunity here to come together to further this food product, further human. Billions of people drink coffee.
mhm.
What we need to do is move things forward together. And for me, if every industry did that, every part of the food industry did that, I don't know, in your health industry, you can probably look at that. If we all, instead of trying to scare people into one lane, but rather said, hey, let's work together on this. We've got to get better at it, and we can only do it cooperatively. And competitors getting together and saying, if we clean this up for ourselves, then we can together make our industry better. And that's what I want coffee to be doing, is demonstrating to the world that we can do that. So there's an
Yeah,
open call to all our competitors, is
yeah,
like, to just talk to me, come to me, let's figure it out. Let's get together, you know?
yeah. Well, it's I think it's a I think it's a message of kindness. It's also a message of, um, an invitation towards a collective. We are one, we are one people. So why not combine forces? I like what you said because it's kind of like, back to something I know I've heard you say is, I'm like, why are we bragging about, or why are we competing about, like, a coffee that just doesn't have these horrible toxins? Like, that's a baseline. But how can we? So I do love, where your company, you've really efforted to talk to, like protect, which brings out more of the liver, enhancing, chlorogenic acid. It's like, this is what for me also very, very simple, because when we go back to, I always think the definition of wellness is one that really always got me. The It's kind of the same trend, the same identification of, like, everybody's excited. They became excited about to talk about wellness, 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 wellness. Let's talk about wellness. When you look at the definition of wellness, wellness is the absence of disease, whereas
Mhm.
health is the not only the absence of, but it's a presence of, mental, physical, emotional well-being. So the presence of something is what we're injecting into, like the product you're talking about, coffee. It is what we're producing, what we're gathering around. So I had a hard time with calling anything wellness. Not to knock anybody out there who's using wellness, because we know colloquially what it means is something different, right?
Correct.
It's okay to
And
have.
we have to use these sound bites to get our message across. Well, our marketing
Yes.
people do,
Yeah,
you
of
know,
course.
but because people don't have time to become experts in everything.
Right.
I don't talk about this a lot, but there is an emerging psychological disorder called orthorexia. Have you heard of it?
Hmm.
You have. A lot
Definitely.
of people haven't. And
Yes, I've
uh,
navigated with patients for sure with this, and, definitely it's pretty close to me.
I feel such compassion for people with this disease because it has come about by these sorts of behaviors. And to a certain extent, I mean, our company, because we produce and we can show our certificates of analysis, and that's something we base it on. It wasn't meant to be used as a weapon, but was meant to help people go, "Okay, okay, I can calm down. I can drink this cup of coffee. And that's one less thing I have to worry about. I've seen
Mhm.
the data, and I know this company now does it over and over, and it's part of their general practice. So, okay, my choice at the grocery store or online of this particular product, and it's again not just us. There are many. We have quite a few competitors out there. Just ask for the same information, and so whatever works for you, then that's one less thing you have to be
Mhm.
worried about. And I worry about people with that disease because it's so much of it is externally put on them, and it just saddens me. Like, we in the food industry have a responsibility of how we talk about our products.
Yeah.
And here's where I don't disagree with a lot of stuff the FDA has. And I've actually talked to FDA people, and they are extremely helpful in the past. I mean, I haven't talked to anybody in the past, like, couple years. Europeans also, they're doing the work on food safety, and I'm talking about food safety work. So if we could all just comply, and
Mhm.
that way humans could, like, relax about what they're eating, and then use their life energy for something else other than trying to avoid dying from eating a certain food or not. I mean, when you can't think two thoughts at the same time. Just
Mhm.
like you can't read a book and be listening to something, you're
Yeah.
reading, it's two things, right? Your brain just can't do it. So if you're worried about constantly everything you're putting in your body, all those that time you're thinking and reading labels and doing all this stuff because you don't trust the system, you're not using that time to be the person you have been put on earth to do. Like, what
Mhm.
is your contract with the divine? Like, what are
Mhm.
you here to do? And that's where we want you to be healthy so that you can achieve that.
Mhm.
Like, and that's what I want people drinking their morning cup of coffee, is not to be worried. I can do this. I've been nourished by this. This is where sacred cups comes into it. And
Mhm.
imagine every morning, not millions, billions of people have a similar routine to you in drinking their coffee. Just that is such a unifying concept.
Mhm.
That every morning, somebody who starts their morning with a cup of coffee, we can relate to every other human being who's starting their morning with a cup of coffee and wanting to go into doing their lives and doing what they came here on earth to do.
Yeah.
So I want, not just with the coffee, but every food product, us to remove the worry. So we got to get back to
Yeah.
basics. Yeah. And so
Yeah, I
that's what
value
I
that.
want. Yeah, that's not my legend, but hopefully when I shuffle off this mortal coil, what I will have left just a couple steps forward maybe in this one industry.
Your memoirs, "When I Shuffle Off This Mortal Coil." It's a poetic title right there, I like it. Um, but the halcyon message that you put out there, though, I love it because, I mean, first of all, talking about something that I love to do is take away as much as I can people's fears and hyper concerns. And I'm like, you know what? Y'all are sure. Sometimes you need to scrutinize over what you're eating, what you're doing, I've had people come in who were so sensitive to EMF that they had to build a Faraday cage around their house. And I'm legitimately, that was true for that person. And that's crazy, but it's not crazy for them. They would be crazy not to do what they needed. But then to have like a lot of others who might see those things exist and we're so concerned. And this is why I love what you said, and also the work that I'm doing, as faculty of the Institute of Applied Quantum Biology. Meredith Oak, who founded that, is like she's a very down to earth person who said, this is all we have these amazing people out there who have put forth quantum biological
Mm.
perspectives and all of that, but she came at it like, as a mom, she's also an executive coach. She's like, "How can I make this information easy? People can get it. People with kids or whoever, they can just simple practices." And I think that's, as somebody's like, how can I buy the exact grounding mat that's going to give me all those negative ions? And I'm like, well, first of all, those mats have been proven on the documentary Earthing and all the research. They're amazing. So I speak out of both sides and I say, oh, that $80 grounding mat is revolutionary. Also putting your hands in the dirt and the soil, putting your hand on a tree, putting your feet on the grass when it's clean grass, right? It's pesticide in laden grass. It's not great for us. But anyways, we just need to breathe in that fresh air sometimes. And that's a good start. So I definitely have felt the heartbreak of when people I know are struggling and they're almost like so constricted in their options and it's so anxiety inducing. And my heart goes out to those that have to do that. And then also
Yeah.
though I see where there is a lot that's to say that some of us have gone too far in that. But I think there's also this compromise to alchemize part two of the part also, not part two, even though that's like, this is part two of that is saying the compromise part can be something somebody might meditate on for most of their lives if they
Mm.
haven't been able to make it through. So I want to speak to there are some of you
Well,
out there
I'm going to
who
stop you here a second
yes,
because you've said something very important
please.
for the food industry, and that is when authorities and regulators come up with numbers of what is safe, what is not safe. They're looking at the generally healthy adult, or they're looking at children and, all the studies that would be done there. But you've brought up that there are people who are dealing with serious health issues. And this is where when the industries, and it's not just the coffee industry that does this, but other industries, they just say, look, these are safe levels. And here, even if you produce a certificate of it, well, some people are so compromised or going through something that no level is a safe level. And
Mhm.
so knowing that, oh, there is a level of XYZ in this food product, I know I can't have that because that will weaken me further.
Mhm. Yeah.
That those are the people we need to honor with
Yes.
putting our best practices forward, because we can always say, "Ugh, don't worry about it," to somebody, but to somebody who it's actually a concern, when you do that, I probably go, "Oh," and I don't want to upset people like that.
No,
We wanna honor people
you
and
care so
whatever
much that
that they're in.
yeah. Ildi, I know you care so much about people. I'm not saying something you weren't saying, but with with what you've done, what you've learned, but also just who you are, you care about people. And I think that's comes through. And I think it's really important, like to say that's like coffee is this product that is so important. And yet, to say people out there, if you're drinking your cup of matcha and that's what makes it make sense for you, and if the
Drink
ritual
it,
of chai, I
please.
was born in
Right.
no, I was born in India. My parents were born in India. So my mom and my dad brewing 5 cups of chai. Now I make coffee for them and they're like, "Ooh, Neil, this is good. I like this too." And that's very, very drama. My dad doesn't really talk like that, but I hyper make Indian accent. But in that way, it's like, yeah, maybe it's your cup of chai, maybe it's your cup of paraxanthine. I've had that out there where I drank the paraxanthine, and that was cool. For me,
Your
I
body produces it naturally from
yeah,
caffeine in your liver. Just side note.
yeah, no, totally. We're gonna have an
Just
off
spent
the air
money on
conversation
what
about this.
your body produces.
I know. No, I think there's in all the mushroom coffees, and Paul Stamets did an amazing thing when he brought like medicinal mushrooms onto the planet. But for me, thankfully, purity is like gold, and I've been able to luxuriate and find that thing that is it was simple for me. It's like once I found that it worked, I'm like, that's it. Like I'm gonna have it, and I'm gonna have different kinds at different times. But I'm also a creature of rhythm where it's like, oof, I just love flow. That medium roast. I'm like,
That's
it's what does
yeah,
it for
my
me.
favorite.
Yeah, so I feel like coffee is in water though. I just want to introduce you to Meredith. I want to introduce you to, Dr. Shamini Jain, who is on the podcast, who's got the CHI Conscious Healing Initiative, tons of research around biofield science. She's amazing. You'd love her. But also Robert Slovak, who we're going to do an episode soon. But he's one of the leading water scientists on the planet. I knew Gary Greenfield, who passed away, who was also one of the leading water scientists who and his son Zach is out there doing a lot with structuring in agricultural macro scale and structuring water with the vortices that are helping us live at a higher expression. So I think even if your thing is
I'll
it
tell
traces,
you the water thing is huge,
yeah,
Neil, because I mean, we are water. We like this, we are done as a
yes,
species if the water is not
yeah,
sorted out. So
absolutely,
God bless every person cleaning up the water. I follow the ocean cleanup on Instagram,
hmm
and they're just like pulling plastic, millions and
yeah,
millions of plastic out of the ocean, out of riverways. And I tell you, whenever rabbit holes, whenever there's the lottery goes up to over $1 billion, I'll buy tickets and I'll say, when I win this, it's going to the ocean cleanup.
yeah. Well, you
I
know,
just want to win it for the ocean cleanup
yes,
because and the water people
yeah,
because
absolutely.
they're doing the
Well,
the best, most important work
I
for
mean, I
us.
love Ted. When everybody knows your name, Ted Danson. Cheers. But his one of his biggest things is alliances towards like water cleanup, and I think taking out you just put it a huge topic out there. Taking out the bad, just like mold, is good. But yet you have like Robert Slovak, Gerald Pollack. Tracy Dews even is in San Diego, and she's like some of the ones I know and we know and other people know and collaborate with are the future water healers, right? There's, Veda Austin, even
Mm,
if you haven't come across her, she's talking about this divine intelligence that comes from the understanding of water, which Masaru Emoto was the OG guy, who.
right.
But it's like it's amazing how water. Oh, we have to do all these things to get it back to what it was designed to be for us in the first place, and it's
Us meaning the entire world, every organism.
yes, it's true. It's true. Yeah, you're right. You're like 98% of coffee is water. So
I mean, the
we
plants, the everything. Oh gosh.
it's beautiful when you can find ways to some people will do the same. They'll say, "Oh, what do we do with water?" I'm like, "Well, first of all, baby steps, just there are little things you can do every day. Like some people don't know that if you want to structure water, you don't have to buy this four-stage filter with crystals and vortices and swirl water around. If you take water and put it out in the sun for 10 minutes, it structures water. If put chia seeds in water and you soak them in there, they're hydrophilic and they exchange and structure the water. But so there's so many ways to have healthy options that make it simple and palatable, um, that don't encourage the back to that topic of the orthorexia because that can manifest in all these different ways. So um but I think from you, oh, here, if we have to come to an end here, which we do because I have somebody who's I have a consult here shortly. um the part two to my question I want to ask you, Ildi, on personal legend is your story, your purpose, your what you're put on this planet to do. I really appreciated hearing that. There's the second part, which is if your legend is like a legend on a map that's down there in the corner and it symbols like telling you, oh, there are trees over there, there's a body of water over there, or it's, like 1 inch to go from there, which is like 10 miles. Like, what are the signposts, symbols, or practices in your life that help you keep aligned to your legend? That keep this is meant to be aspirational, also to those of you who are listening to want to learn more about like how Ildi has gone on this journey to consistently know. Like, what are there any things that come to mind of like what keeps you aligned with your legend?
My first thing, it's not going to answer your question is just all the mistakes I've made.
Mm.
And I just think of, you know, anybody who's listening, if I ever said anything wrong or did anything wrong, I'm so sorry.
Mhm.
But I've learned from each of those things. So the signposts along the way, there was I once read, and I hope this is true, is Mother Teresa was in India and helping the poor, and there was a journalist following her, and he said, "How do you feel successful when it's just the poor are just everywhere and it just seems endless?"
Mhm.
And she said, "I'm not here to be successful. I'm here to serve."
Mm.
So for me, that and I heard that many years ago when I was in my 20s, when I first went to Zimbabwe. And I just thought, no, that's the way forward, is to serve. So the signposts along the way, whether it was serving my children, my family, my extended family, or every single person who drinks a cup of coffee that I have had some responsibility in. Those are the signposts along the way you know, learning the science, both the Newtonian and the quantum. And so the science along the way, you know, um, these producers we work with are, I don't know if they're unsung heroes, but boy, if I could put each one of them on my map. Each one has taught me so much, and there other farmers out there who are doing this sort of work, and just each one of them is an inspiration to me, and I've learned from. I don't know what other signposts there are other than um just our health, our physical health keeps these bodies going that contain our consciousness and our soul and our spirit is all what we use, and this is our time here. These
Mhm.
are our minutes on earth,
Mm.
and how we spend them, every choice we make. So when you work, the work that you do, whether you love it or you don't love it or you need a new job, you're getting pieces of paper called dollars. Well, or whatever. You're getting dollars in your account for what your life energy is worth. And then you turn around and you take those dollars and you spend them on different things. And what you spend them on is a reflection of your time on earth, your life energy, right? So when somebody uses their dollars on the coffee that I have had a part in creating, they're giving me part of their life essence, and I take that responsibility very seriously because and we communicate with the producers. We regularly let them know what people are saying about the coffee, and that has inspired them so much to realize that what they're doing, back to your cleaning the glasses, is that that sort of work inspires everybody, and if we understand that concept of we're all transferring our energy together and honoring each other's life essences, there's responsibility there. Anyway, those are the sort of key things that would be on the legend of my map. I don't know. They wouldn't make sense because my life doesn't make sense, so
Well, no, that was great. I feel like you started out by saying this is not going to answer, but mistakes. can be some of the greatest lessons, and I feel really resonant with that when somebody's saying like, "How did you figure all this out?" Or if they're complimenting me or saying like, and most of my trainings when I'm teaching organizations or healers, practitioners, I usually say, this is what didn't work. And that's how I knew to keep going to what worked. But I also, I felt you when you said to anybody that you have led astray with I feel it's really important to say like, well, we are people, we're going to make mistakes, but that you keep going and that you're furthering and that you're pursuing more and more and more for the greater good is I think such an inspiring signpost or provocation. So yeah.
Well, thank you, and you're doing the same thing. We're here. We're here on Earth at this time together, Neil. Like
Yeah.
like how lucky is that that I
Yeah.
got to meet you on this trajectory.
Yeah.
And
I
then someday our physical won't be here, but
Mhm.
we will have added our energy into the universe. So
Yeah.
thank you for this talk. I
Yeah.
don't want it to end, but you have to go.
No. Well, thank you for being on the Compromise to Alchemize podcast, Ildi. I feel there are many places where people could say, wow, I didn't know they'd go there. But also, I think that could have spoken to somebody. So just share this for those of you who feel whatever feeling, like all the timbers, all the elements, all the spectra, the colors that came to mind. Just share this with somebody that would benefit from this. And I can't wait to have another hopeful conversation with you, Ildi, on my podcast. Thank you for listening to the Compromise to Alchemize podcast. Really excited to thank Jessica from Lunalux for the music, this track called Major. I want to thank Toshi, who originally did the design work for my cover art. And then I also want to thank Alyssa from my team for podcast publishing, my whole team, including Kat, for heading up my world. And then also definitely want you all to follow me on YouTube, follow the podcast on Spotify or Apple or wherever you get your podcast. Comment, give us a rating, and also follow me on Instagram at Dr. Neil Bulchandani so you can stay tuned to my latest. Thanks so much, and you have an amazing day. This is major.